This episode of Inside EMS is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support, and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com. Well, here it is. It's time for Inside EMS, or as our fans affectionately know it, the Chris and Kelly Show. We are here and we are live and we are trying to bring you the latest and greatest of EMS education, EMS news, EMS chatter. What the heck is everybody talking about inside EMS? And we are bringing it to you. And the partner, the man, the guy that's been with me the longest, 10 years, 600 plus shows, 2 million plus listens. Kelly, Grayson, KG, what's going on?
Oh man, just living the dream, doing my thing, saving lives, stamping out disease and pestilence.
You know, how's that been going? You've been stamping out disease and pestilence for 10 years.
Man, the Grim Reaper is out there and he's only getting stronger. It's just we all in EMS and healthcare try to fight the good fight, but if it were not for stupidity, we would have no job security. So, like you can't beat stupidity. And hey, y'all watch this. So.
No, you can't. You know, one of the things that was really interesting is there's a study out right now that I just started to look at, and a couple of EMS big names are in it. Of course, we've had Remley Crowe on the show, Dr. Remley Crowe, and one of the foremost researchers, I think, in our field. And there is a study that I have to get into, so I don't want to get too deep in the numbers yet, but I think it's something that we need to be able to eventually talk about, Kelly, and I'll send you the study. Out of 1.7 million EMS calls that were looked at from the NEMSIS system, only 6% needed EMS intervention, or 109,000 calls.
I can believe that.
And so when we talk about that, or when we think about that, where is the real waste in EMS? We're taking 1.6, 1.5 million people to the hospital that don't need to go. But again, please do not use those numbers in your discussion, because I just perused it and I just kind of looked at the summary. But that's something Kelly Grayson
Great fodder for another podcast.
It would, yeah. So I'll send you the study so you can look at it as well, Kelly. But another thing that I think is controversial, last week we talked about our work that we're going to do in Choctaw County EMS in Durant, Oklahoma. Yep. And I think that's supposed to be coming up here. So it's 15. Yep. It was
July 15th through the 18th.
Yeah. So this show may actually be coming out that Friday. We do record the shows a little bit early, so we just want to be able to let everybody know that. But one of the things that you and I did in New York State was we did a EMS Smackdown on different, we kind of took the show on the road, and I thought it was obviously, we had a good classroom where you and I debated some of the challenges that were going on. We talked about intubation, and we talked about ultrasound, and this might be another one. Maybe we could get the organizers to put us together on, doing something at lunch, doing the EMS Smackdown or whatever. Yeah. But anyway, Kelly, another one that I think has a lot of controversy in EMS is medical marijuana. And we've broached this subject before with medical marijuana. Mm-hmm. We had an attorney on from New York. There was a firefighter in Buffalo who was fired, and they were kind of fighting that fight. But now, as we start to see more and more states that are going to medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, EMS agencies really have to think about where the stand is going to be for the agency of what we will allow and what we do not allow. Yeah. And just as an example, in my new role, we've had to think about, in some of the states, specifically Utah, where we have operations, and Ohio, where we have operations, medical marijuana is big. And I've always been on the contention that if a doctor is going to prescribe you medical marijuana, where does the organization have a leg to stand on to say that you can't use that drug or medication? And what's next? And I use this as an example. I am pro because I don't know that we have the ability to tell people you can't utilize this on the job.
Yeah.
Recreational marijuana is something that's totally different. I think I could take a different stand on it. I think that's something that you were choosing to do.
Hmm.
But I may have to be able to make a concession in the coming months, years to say, well, if we tell people they can't drink 12 hours before their shift, 10 hours before their shift, can we tell them that they can't smoke? But I thought it
Okay.
would be really interesting. So Kelly, you and I got on this because you live in New York State now, and you were
Hmm.
basically saying you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a dispensary. But from an EMS
True.
standpoint and from the traditionalist standpoint of EMS, is it time that we have to be able to think about this for our people and give them a little bit of leeway? So I'll give you an example before I let you start. I love this because you're letting me talk uninterrupted. So this is really something that's unusual. But
Well, you babble, so I'm used to it.
oh, thanks. So, but we were approached by one of our folks to say, well, what do I do here? And it was the contention of the leadership and the senior leadership to say, we need to come up with some type of practice. So what we said was, you're not going to be impaired at work. If you're impaired at work, we'll send you for a drug test. And we find that you're positive, you'll be terminated. Right. So,
Yeah.
you need to be able to do the mission. You need to be able to not seem impaired, because if they go for a drug test, they're going to test positive. We're going to fire them. So we
Yeah.
tried to put a lot of things in place. There's no test for impairment. You'll come back either positive or negative. But I do think that being a paramedic for many years, we have studied and we have figured out what impairment looks like. Now, we can get caught up on metabolic issues that could be determined to be. And a lot of times, one of the things that we don't do, Kelly, is when we see people that are having mental challenges or when we see people that seem to be impaired, we're not considering the metabolic side of the business. We're just automatically assuming impairment. So
Yeah.
I think I've gone in a lot of different areas, but let me shut up and drink some coffee while you go ahead and set it up and hit it from your side.
I, I think the time has come that we need to accept that marijuana use is becoming part of a societal norm, just like alcohol use. We don't, you know, we require that people not be impaired due to alcohol, or tell them what they can and cannot do alcohol wise off duty. So I think we should treat marijuana use the same way. In New York State, in Louisiana, oh my God, you might as well be a serial killer if they catch you with an ounce of weed. But in New York State, an ounce of weed means that's so cute. You're just getting started, aren't you? Get in the car and drive 10 minutes from my house, and I could probably count 50 dispensaries, and I'm in the country. What I can't find is any place that sells Shiner Bock. I don't. I think the dispensaries outnumber the liquor stores probably 10 to 1 up here, which is amazing to me. But everybody is doing weed. They're either smoking or they're doing edibles. I just don't. I think the problem is logistics. How the heck do we do this and establish some sort of minimum standard for what is impaired, what is not impaired, use, that sort of thing? How do we do that in the workplace is a thorny issue because number one, it's still federally illegal. The case might be made that if you take CMS dollars, if you're essentially getting federal reimbursement for the service you provide, do they have a case for a provider who is consuming marijuana? I don't know. I know that we had at the school, we had a student who would smoke a joint for stress relief after tests or before tests, and he would step out of the classroom and step outside the building, and you could look out the window and see him down in the parking lot smoking a joint, and it was a pretty constant thing. I think he poor guy needed to be half baked to make it through EMT class, and he not wound up not making it through EMT class for unrelated reasons. But they had to put a stop to that because the point was made to us, hey, I know that it's legal in New York, but we receive federal funding, and through federal student loans and everything else, and we have to adhere to federal guidelines on this.
If people don't know, if you receive, or if you're receiving federal funds, if you're getting Medicare dollars, there are provisions in those contracts that say you cannot use or you cannot employ any type of people that are using drugs, and you certify that you will manage that for that money. So I just wanted to throw that in.
I think that you mentioned there's no test for impairment, and there's as far as alcohol use goes, the test is literally about reaction time and fine motor skills. It's literally a test to see if you can operate heavy machinery, and there is no such thing for marijuana use. I don't know that it would be ill suited to testing for the same thing for a patient who's using marijuana. What concerns me more is not just that, but your cognitive processes. And this is me speaking as a weed naive dude. I smoked one joint my year of the night of my graduation from high school. That's 2 joints, and I don't know what my thought processes were at the time. I do know that I woke up the next morning, and saw what I had eaten that night, and vowed never again. But is there a way that we can test someone's decision making capability while they're under the influence of marijuana? I don't know, but I do think that it's common enough, and it's not an addictive drug. I think it's time that we started to look at this realistically rather than this condemnation of marijuana use as the devil's lettuce, and
The devil's
we
lettuce.
got we got politicians that still think that Reefer Madness, the movie was a documentary.
You know,
And
one of the things that I think is happening though, when you talk about federal, is President Biden has already mentioned that he's going to move it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 drug, which is really kind of ridiculous. And politicians did that back in the old days to kind of really to keep their hands, or to keep the merchants out of the hemp business.
yeah,
And they made it a very, very, they called it a Schedule 1 drug, similar to that of heroin, similar to that of fentanyl,
absolutely
methan
nothing.
methamphetamine, correct. But then that's where all the things came from. It's a gateway drug and so on and so forth. Here's my position is this, and I was thinking about this on the 4th of July as we celebrated our country's independence. What was it, 238 years or something like that, since with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But how many of our veterans had horrible time that night because, the war, of course, if we can send them, we should mend them is the big, it's the big saying when it comes to our
Hmm.
veterans that have had some combat related PTSD. But one of the things that I've done a lot of research on is that it seems that marijuana helps some of those folks with severe PTSD, especially the veterans, cope. And when we think about EMS, EMS has a longstanding history of, and this is really where my dissertation is coming in for my doctorate, is I am contending, and I haven't gotten into the research yet, but I am contending that the lack of EMS leadership training is leading to poor treatment and development of employee resilience, right?
I
So
can buy that.
the whole the whole
I'm down with
contention
that
of,
premise.
if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. So I think
We need to abandon that whole
exactly, and
mentality.
I think we've done a really great job over the years of bringing more. But my contention is the lack of leadership training precipitating that as well, because we don't know as leaders how to address those things. But anyway, back to my point, when we start to talk about, it's funny, I was looking through, and I know I'm babbling. I don't know why I'm babbling today, but
Are you on weed?
no, I'd be drooling on myself right now, I think. But
Dude, are there more wheels or doors in the universe?
I don't know what it is. But anyway, when we think about this from the standpoint, I was looking through, my book. So I'm actually, you and I were doing the conference. So I'm doing a class on my book, The Ultimate Leadership, Ultimate Success. So I was looking, and in the beginning of the book, it has all the people that helped me to the cover of this book. So I gave them acknowledgments in the book for those who voted for this cover. But one of the things that's interesting is as I'm going through the list, I'm saying alive, dead, 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 suicide, suicide. And a lot
Mm,
of our peers have put themselves in positions to where they've become alcoholics, they've got strung out on some drugs, or they've just committed suicide. And one of the things that I would hope is that if there's an opportunity for medical marijuana to keep those people from killing themselves. Ketamine is another drug, Kelly, that's been popping up. And I think you and I talked about this a couple of months back, where people are going to ketamine clinics to help them rewire and help them deal with some of the
mhm.
stressors. But if there's anything that will allow people, even if it's just the placebo effect to say this is going to help me get through this fear, who are we to say, sorry, so sad, you can't do it, you're fired? And I think that we
Yeah,
have to really be able to think about giving our folks everything that they may need. And I got to tell you, this is a big change for me because I was one of these traditionalists who said, no beards, no earrings, no showing tattoos. But as I've grown and I've tried to understand, I may have been wrong.
yeah. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody more right wing conservative than I was 15 years ago. When I say right wing conservative, very conservative, not necessarily religious, but Mr. Law and Order, and lock them all up. And that doesn't work. And that's why my philosophy has shifted significantly toward libertarianism. You've heard me say it before. My idea, the ideal society is a legally married gay couple defending their legal marijuana patch with a legal automatic weapon. God bless America. That's freedom right there. I think we need to get past. It's long since time we abandoned this.
Stigma.
Um, I, yeah, exactly. you know, Substance use. I'm not saying that we become the Netherlands, and totally legalize everything, but we need to take some of the punitive costs out of marijuana use and some other drugs. You mentioned ketamine therapy. There's some evidence that controlled use of ecstasy helps some people with PTSD. I think it's time that we started looking at that from a scientific angle rather than a regulatory legislative thing and just ban things by fiat because it's oogie, and actually start looking at some of these things and seeing if they actually help people. And in those cases, if they do help people, I think we should allow it. And the problem is politicians, you know, tend to, they're not the most informed people in the world, and it's our fault for electing people like that. But the politics needs to get out of the equation altogether, and then we shift our focus to what we were talking about. How do we determine a standard for how much marijuana use is acceptable, and how impaired or not impaired you can be safely, or how much influence you can have safely on duty?
Yeah,
Do we
but
even
that's going
have
to
a
take,
rapid test?
but that's going to
Do
take,
we,
that's going to take years, man. What do we do?
but the thing
But
is
Kelly, what do we
to
do
get to
today?
that point, we have to get to do that. We have to get to the point where we say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Now let's figure out how. And I think as a nation, we still haven't gotten to the point of this is what we're going to do. We need to be there.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
there even a rapid test for it?
no, there's not. I mean,
No. And
you could do the rapid test is going to be urinalysis, right? But if
yeah,
drug stays in your system, and I don't know the specifics, a month, let's say, how do I
yeah,
know you didn't smoke it 28 days ago if I
exactly,
give you a drug
exactly.
screen, right? So the
And
problem
did you
is
actually smoke it, or is it contact high from a fish
oh,
concert?
that stuff doesn't work, man.
I
If
know.
you got it in your system, you're smoking it. But it's the same thing now when you start to think about this. I went into a dispensary in Colorado when I was just recently up there, and I just wanted to check it out, man. What's going
Yeah.
on, what do they got? And they have gummies, they have chocolate, they got cookies, they got a tincture that goes under your tongue. Uh,
Hmm.
they got drinks. So it's not just the smoking anymore, vape and
Yeah.
concentrates and all the stuff. I was talking to the girl and she was very, very informative. But it's just all these things now that are available. But again, we have to be able to get to a point of saying, can we tell if somebody is impaired? It's just like taking a hydrocodone, right? So how many people will take, pain medicines, and if you take one, you're okay. But if you take three, you're drooling and peeing all over yourself. And that's kind of like that.
Those are called days that end in Y for Chris.
That's right. And I try not to do those things only because even pain medication, I'm not somebody, I'll stick with a good ibuprofen and, let that stuff work for me. But anyway, to your point about impairment, to the point about rapid testing, what we just have to be able to do is be smart enough to know that you don't seem right.
Yeah.
Right. And that may be, and again, in the policy that I wrote, if there's a suspicion of impairment, we're going to send you for a test. And if that test comes back positive, you're done. Maybe that's unfair, but that was the only thing I was able to get to for the justification of the liability of the organization to say we need to try to keep us as safe. But Kelly, I think this is an issue for us.
So is there some sort of standard for how quickly it is metabolized, and
Don't know.
can you determine from the testing how recently someone has consumed?
You can't.
That's data we need. We seriously need to, if we're going to establish some sort of standard for this. So because you say you had to make a policy that says if you test positive, you're gone, which is kind of like don't ask, don't tell. And that's the solution you had to come up with, and it's an imperfect solution. But wouldn't it be great if we had enough data to we know that, okay, this level is acceptable, and this level is not, rather than say, hey, if you get in an accident and we do drug testing, and even though the accident may have been totally unrelated, and we do drug testing and you pop positive for THC, you're gone. And it's their medicine. There's some inequity in that, and I'm not talking about your agency and everything. You had to come up with a policy and a solution, and that's the one that was best available to you. But that's something that we need to start looking at as a workforce in society. But hey, that's what we think. We'd like to hear what you think. Should medical or even recreational marijuana use be allowed in emergency medical services? If so, what would you propose as a standard for how much and when it is or is not appropriate? We'd like to hear your thoughts. And God, I bet there's going to be a bunch of them at the show at ems1.com. And for myself and co-host Chris Cebollero, y'all thanks for tuning in to Inside EMS. Gonna catch you next week.